But our hero suddenly realized that the necklace was going to be donated to charity. Just then, an elderly man in the crowd shocked everyone by offering a staggering 50 million for the item. The entire room was stunned. No one expected the bidding to jump to such a jaw-dropping number. The host quickly asked if anyone was willing to top Mr. Avenue's bid. Without delay, he began the countdown to close the bidding for the legendary necklace. As the countdown reached 3, the host struck the gavel and thanked the victorious Ao Xiaolong for his generous donation to their charitable cause. Xing Long, however, reacted with a burst of emotion upon seeing the winner. Our protagonist noticed this and figured his friend must have known the man. The chubby companion leaned in and whispered that the man was the leader of the Ao family, an influential figure with power both in the open and the underground world. If the Ao family valued this necklace so highly, it clearly wasn't an ordinary item. It dawned on our hero that in the cultivation world, there were 6 other rare treasures similar to his ring, all collectively known as the ancient armor of immortality. Right away, he suspected that this necklace could be one of those ancient relics. It truly surprised him that something so valuable would show up in a place like this. Meanwhile, some guests at the Thanksgiving banquet gathered in a VIP room. Among them was Yin Lanqi, who still couldn't get over the fact that our hero had dared to mess with his jade pendant. At that moment, Lin Mu felt a strange chill run down his spine. It was the presence of a new and unfamiliar enemy. One assistant approached his master to ask for new orders. The mysterious man, named Qing Shi, carried a chilling aura and had snow-white skin that gave off an eerie vibe. Yin Lanqi coldly declared that he no longer wanted to see that young man in the white suit ever again. His subordinates immediately understood the meaning behind his words and swore that the boy wouldn't live to see the next day. However, the man also pointed out that our hero had considerable skills and warned his assistant not to underestimate him. Xing Shi confidently told his master not to worry, insisting that he had never lost a battle. Soon after, the host officially announced the end of the charity banquet and thanked all the guests for their generosity. Our protagonist then decided to ask his chubby friend why he had brought him to this event in the first place. The latter reminded him to watch what he said, noting that many people wanted to attend but didn't get the chance. Xing Weilong explained that he had originally planned to buy something too and had asked his friend to help him with the bidding, but things didn't go as expected. He had only brought 5 million, thinking it would be enough, but in the end, he didn't even get the chance to bid. He sighed, saying that the wealthy folks from Donghai were too unpredictable, which made the competition extremely tough. To him, spending 50 million on a necklace no matter how exquisite was just outrageous. The protagonist guessed that Ao Xiaolong might have bought the necklace as a gift for someone special. In response, the chubby friend started to suspect that Ao Xiaolong might be doing someone a huge favor by purchasing it. Suddenly, Lin Mu said he had to leave urgently. Xing Long was surprised at the sudden departure, since he was planning to invite Lin Mu to dinner. Lin Mu, however, emphasized that this was a matter of great importance and promised to join him for dinner next time. Driven by a gut feeling, Lin Mu followed his instincts, which led him to the underground parking lot. At that moment, Mr. Ao, along with his 2 bodyguards, was preparing to leave. It turns out Lin Mu was already planning to retrieve the $50 million necklace. For now, he didn't act. He simply observed the car as it exited the parking area. Soon after, as Mr. Ao's car paused at a traffic light, Lin Mu managed to catch up. He knew that his first task was to figure out exactly where the necklace was hidden, so he refrained from acting immediately. He also knew this mountainous area had many traffic lights, making it easy to trail the car. But suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. He sensed a familiar, dangerous glare fixed on him. A few shady figures appeared behind him, but their presence didn't feel like that of ordinary thugs. Without hesitation, Lin Mu turned around and asked the men who they were, his voice steady and fearless. The mercenaries didn't waste time explaining. Instead, they launched an attack immediately. Lin Mu thought such a frontal assault was too simple-minded, and he effortlessly dodged their initial strike. But what caught him off guard was that 3 more blades came flying from the shadows. The bandits had executed a well-coordinated sneak attack. Realizing this, Lin Mu calmly straightened his tie and smirked. "Just a little closer, and you might have actually scratched me," he said, but it was too late. The bandits froze in disbelief. How had this guy dodged all their hidden blades? Suddenly, a flash caught Lin Mu's eye from behind, prompting him to react instantly. The professional mercenaries had changed their approach and were attacking differently now. Linmu quickly seized one of them and expressed his frustration at their sneaky tactics. With one precise move, he disarmed the bandit who had tried to backstab him. Realizing they were no match for Linmu, the rest decided to flee. But our protagonist didn't let up. He struck one opponent so hard that the man was launched into the air. In a blink, Linmu closed in on the others, noting how sluggish they were. They had no chance to react to his lightning-fast moves and scattered in panic. One remaining bandit saw all his comrades taken out in an instant. He couldn't comprehend how Linmu had managed it. Just then, Linmu tried to land a hit, but missed entirely. Was sure he aimed correctly, yet struck only thin air. The most elusive of the attackers had vanished and reappeared elsewhere, smiling with satisfaction at his speed. Linmu admitted the bandit was quick, but vowed not to miss again. Still, even his next blow swiped through empty space, hitting nothing but air. The ghost-like bandit remained untouched. At that moment, the mercenary leader gathered his team and remarked that Linmu was tougher than expected, but he had already figured out how to beat him. Then, as if evaporating into mist, all three vanished without a trace. Linmu had never faced such a technique before and couldn't understand how it worked. Taking a closer look, he realized they were manipulating air currents around their bodies, creating hallucinations that interfered with their enemy's senses. Sensing Linmu's hesitation, the bandits thought it was the perfect moment to strike. They passed right through him, shocked by how ineffective their attack was. Linmu smirked. He had already seen through their illusion. He reasoned that their technique was flawed by their emotions and that they hadn't mastered it completely. This gave him an advantage. He boldly questioned whether they were mercenaries hired to kill him, and his words shook them. They now feared they had targeted someone of high status. Nervously, they asked Linmu to come with them and clear up the misunderstanding. But he refused. It had more important matters to handle. Their leader warned that 9 assassins had been sent on this mission, implying serious trouble ahead. Still, Linmu told them not to worry, was confident none of them could defeat him. Watching all this from a nearby rooftop was Qin Sha, the real mastermind behind the attack. He hadn't expected Linmu to grasp the shadow technique so quickly, nor to beat the first wave of assassins with ease. Licking his blade, he prepared to personally step in and finish the job, convinced that Linmu wouldn't be able to handle his skills. At that moment, Linmu bolted off, running at full speed to catch up with Mr. Rao's car. But he soon realized he had completely lost sight of it and began thinking of a backup plan. Out of nowhere, an invisible force sliced through the air in front of him, stopping him in his tracks. He had no time to react. The ambush landed a brutal hit. It was Qin Sha. He didn't expect Linmu to dodge that first blow. Linmu instantly knew this was no ordinary enemy, but he never imagined someone so strong would attack from the shadows. Qin Sha declared coldly that he was a killer and would do whatever it took to achieve his goal. Linmu, now on the ground and losing strength, asked if Qin Sha had been following him since the earlier mercenary fight. The assassin confirmed it, saying Linmu's strength had forced him to launch a surprise attack. He also revealed that Linmu was only the second target to be killed this way. Using the last of his energy, Linmu asked for his attacker's name. He wanted to know the name of the person who would kill him. Qin Sha hesitated, but ultimately gave in and shared his name. Linmu quietly repeated the name to himself, determined to remember it. As Qin Sha turned to leave, Linmu lay in a pool of his own blood. Just then, he sensed something stirring behind him. It wasn't over yet. He wasn't ready to die. Linmu was stunned to see the assassin dodge his perfectly timed attack. It was a move so stealthy that even he couldn't believe it had failed. He was sure it had been a flawless strike, yet the enemy had sensed it and reacted in time. Qin Sha, the assassin, was equally shocked. He hadn't expected Linmu to be faking his death, especially after taking such a direct stab. But Linmu wasn't wasting any time. He launched a follow-up attack immediately, only to be dodged once again. That's when he realized that Qin Sha wasn't just skilled in martial combat, was also highly trained in the spiritual realm, having opened both his middle and lower dantian points. Even so, Linmu wasn't intimidated. Despite being injured, he believed he still stood a chance to win. With all the strength he had left, Linmu shouted that the only one dying today would be Qin Sha. The assassin began to panic. How could someone so badly wounded still deliver punches with such terrifying power? In the next instant, Lin Mu finally broke through Qing Sha's defenses and closed the distance between them completely. He gathered all his qi into his hand to deliver one devastating, final blow. Qing Sha couldn't block it. The impact landed with precision and incredible force, causing his body to bend in half. Blood sprayed from his mouth, and his eyes widened in pure disbelief. His strength failed him, and he collapsed to the ground, completely spent. Even a master of his level couldn't withstand such a strike. Barely holding on, Qing Sha asked Lin Mu who he really was. Lin Mu, also on the brink of collapse, spoke with a trembling voice, telling him to remember the name Lin Mu, the man who defeated him. Qing Sha couldn't believe how things had turned out. He was certain his blade had found its mark. As Lin Mu staggered away from the assassin, he began to feel the effects of the poison on Qing Sha's knife. It was already spreading through his heart and lungs. After all that fighting, this was how it might end lying alone in the middle of the street. Eventually, Lin Mu's body gave in, and he fell to the ground, filled with regret for not being better prepared. His eyelids grew heavier and began to close. Just before losing consciousness, he saw a pair of feet standing in front of him. Someone had arrived. The story continued into that same night, but now the scene had changed. Lin Mu had been taken to a temple, and someone had saved him. Although he was awake, he was still feeling extremely weak. The girl who saved him was kneeling in prayer for her late master. 10 years ago, when Yunner was still very young, she had accidentally caused an old man's death. Before dying, the old man had told her that a healer's duty was to save the terminally ill, and if giving his life could save her, he would die without regret. He asked his student to survive and help more people in need. Tears welled up in Yunner's eyes as she remembered how the old man had adopted her and treated her strange illness with care and sacrifice. After every treatment, the master seemed to age rapidly, clearly giving up his own vitality to save her. Now, Yunner was ready to use a complex technique she hadn't yet fully mastered. She opened a box containing acupuncture needles and a handwritten note from her master, thanking her for honoring the title of divine healer. Determined not to let Lin Mu die, she carefully inserted needles into his body with surgical precision, her fingers steady and sure. She urged Lin Mu to hold on and not give up on life. Lin Mu's mind drifted in and out, the world around him a blur. A groan escaped his chest as the pain intensified. Yunner was nervous. The secret technique consumed an enormous amount of energy, and she was unsure if she'd survive the process herself. But remembering her master's sacrifices, she decided she wouldn't give up either. She silently pleaded to her master for strength, recalling how he had taught her the importance of precision in acupuncture. She continued inserting the needles, remembering that each point must be struck with speed and that dwelling too long on any one point could ruin everything. Still struggling to stay hopeful, she watched closely as the black hue on Lin Mu's face began to fade, a sign her technique was working. But her relief distracted her, and one of the needles slipped from her fingers. She immediately recalled her master's warning. If the process was interrupted, the patient could die. Desperate to maintain Lin Mu's condition, she used her own life force to stabilize him, injecting energy directly into his body and trying to bind his yang. The strain was immense. Her breathing grew heavier. And finally, she collapsed beside him on the bed, completely drained, but she had succeeded. Lin Mu was now out of danger. Meanwhile, across town, Saidashu was sleeping peacefully in her home until a sudden phone call jolted her awake. Still drowsy, she picked up the phone and heard the voice of her assistant, Lianju, who had urgent news. Lin Mu had been missing for 3 days. The moment she heard his name, snapped out of her drowsiness. She realized the situation was more serious than she had thought. Her future plans for cultivation were closely tied to Lin Mu, and she couldn't afford to lose him. She tried to stay calm and figure out what could have happened. Her gut told her that Yin Lanqi, her former fiancé, might be involved. Without hesitation, she called him, her voice full of anger, demanding to know if he had anything to do with Lin Mu's disappearance. Back at the temple, Lin Mu remained unconscious, recovering under Dr. Zhou's care. She had paid a high price to save him and lay beside him, completely depleted. After some time, Zhou slowly opened her eyes. At first, she thought she was in the afterlife. Her vision cleared, and warm relief washed over her. She was still alive. She jumped out of bed and looked around for Linmu, assuming he had already left. But to her surprise, he was just outside meditating, trying to restore his chi. Linmu smiled when he heard her voice, relieved to see that she had also survived the ordeal. Joe was surprised at how quickly he had recovered, though she herself still felt extremely weak. After only a few sentences, she began coughing violently. Linmu rushed to support her, but she insisted she was fine. He gently told her not to push herself and assured her that his body was already back to normal. Sitting beside her at the table, Linmu thanked her from the bottom of his heart, promising to repay her for saving his life. Joe humbly replied that it was a doctor's duty to treat the wounded and that she didn't expect anything in return. Linmu was curious about how she had neutralized the deadly poison in his body. She explained that she had used an acupuncture method passed down from her master, a technique described in a secret manual that had saved countless lives. However, she had only learned it superficially, and using it had been a great challenge for her. Noticing her pale skin, Linmu asked her to rest and not strain herself further. Joe replied that she had always been physically weak, which made Linmu even more concerned. He asked if there was any way he could help. That's when she shared her story, how her master had used all his life force to save her from a terminal illness. Linmu found it hard to believe that even her master had been powerless against such a disease, especially since Joe had managed to use the secret technique despite her limited training. Just then, Joe's strength failed. Her head spun, and cold sweat broke out on her skin. She fainted on the table. Linmu quickly caught her, worried that she had pushed herself too far. He gently carried her to bed, thinking she might have risked her own life to save his. As he looked around the room, he noticed how neat and tidy everything was, a reflection of Joe's personality. Something caught his eye, a section of bricks on the wall that looked different from the rest. Curious, he pushed one of the bricks aside and discovered a hidden compartment. Inside were several old letters. He opened them and realized they were written by Joe's master, addressed to her. The old man revealed that his real name was Mu Jianqing and that he had been secretly teaching her the family's ancient acupuncture technique. He wrote that he once traveled the world healing the sick, but after offending a mysterious organization, he had to hide the family's secrets in Donghai. When Joe fell ill, he was already injured, so he sealed her meridians to prolong her life for 10 more years. He hoped someone with a high enough cultivation level would appear to save her using the yang extraction method, dangerous to use, but warned that without sufficient power, the technique was too. Linmu realized he had to give these letters to Joe as soon as she woke up. He sat in deep thought, amazed that such a powerful healing method existed and that it required such a high level of cultivation to use safely. By evening, Joe finally regained consciousness. Confused, she looked around, trying to remember what had happened. Linmu was right by her side. He asked how she was feeling and handed her the letters. Reading her master's words was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. She hadn't known that he had continued to look out for her even after his death. Through her tears, she asked Linmu where he found the letters. He explained how he had discovered the hidden compartment during his brief cleaning. Joe wished she had met someone talented enough to truly master her master's technique. Linmu then hinted that he might be the very person her master had hoped for. Joe laughed and told him not to joke. She didn't think he had the proper foundation or cultivation skills. But Linmu confidently asked her to trust him. He concentrated his chi energy and demonstrated his abilities, forming energy at his fingertips. Joe was stunned. Not many masters could control their energy with such precision. They stepped outside for some fresh air, and Joe remarked that Linmu had been hiding his true abilities all along. He replied that maybe her illness could be cured even without reaching the highest cultivation level. He believed that where there was life, there was always hope. Joe reflected on her dream of saving more people before her illness changed everything. Linmu reminded her that good deeds always come back around. She had saved his life and he would repay her in kind. Her master's words echoed in her mind. To save a life is to save your own. She remembered his comforting hands and his teachings about a healer's duty. Linmu thanked her one final time and said it was time for him to return home. She understood she had to return to the hospital herself. They said their goodbyes. Half an hour later, Linmu had crossed the bridge near his house. He was still thinking about how incredible the yang extraction technique was and how its creator must have had an unmatched understanding of the human body. Just then, he noticed a crowd gathered by the riverbank. Everyone was staring at the water in alarm. A car had apparently driven straight into the river. The people around him were talking nonstop. They all agreed the driver was in deep trouble. No one expected such a luxury sports car to end up in a place like this. The young man felt a surge of concern, as the victim might be someone he knew, so he promptly inquired among the bystanders about what had transpired. A man who had already attempted to help in the water explained that a girl had plummeted off the bridge, but underwater, the vehicle's windows proved too formidable for him to break. Our protagonist realized he could not simply stand by idly, so he decisively made his way towards the water. Everyone present warned Linmu that his efforts would be futile and that waiting for rescuers was the better option, yet he simply could not afford to waste precious time. The young man intended to dive down and try regardless, because if they solely waited for official rescuers to arrive, only the submerged car would ultimately be salvaged. Without even pausing to undress, he quickly plunged into the water, disregarding all personal risks to his own life. In an instant, he felt the chilling coolness of the water envelop him as he dove towards the bottom, searching for the victim. Our hero was relieved that the water here was quite shallow, and he carefully scanned his surroundings to locate the car. Eventually, he did manage to spot a distinct red sports car, which immediately filled him with a surge of hope. Mentally, Linmu urged the girl to hold on just a little longer while he swam swiftly towards her. It turned out that the young man's immediate fears were well-founded. His acquaintance, Luo Yun, was indeed trapped behind the steering wheel. Luo Yun was already unconscious after being submerged for such an extended period, so she was no longer even struggling for her life. The main character possessed immense strength, still having more than enough power to forcefully shatter the car window. Linmu acknowledged that the glass was remarkably strong, speculating that it might have been bulletproof, which made it unsurprising that an average person couldn't break it. However, for Linmu, such an obstacle posed no challenge whatsoever, and in mere seconds, shards of glass flew in various directions. In this manner, the young hero successfully managed to extract Luo Yun from the vehicle, giving her a vital chance at rescue. Our hero instantly recognized that his acquaintance was on the verge of death, so he urgently needed to transfer some energy to her as rapidly as possible. The brave hero gently bent down, and his lips tenderly met the girl's pale lips, a desperate attempt to prevent her from succumbing. The narrative now shifts back a couple of minutes to when Luo Yun first plunged into the water, and she began to ponder what people truly live for. Out of sheer hopelessness, she surmised that everyone had vastly different goals, with many aiming to bring glory to their family name or establish a highly profitable business. The water increasingly inundated the car's interior, and the girl agonizingly realized that she had absolutely no hope of rescue, so she could no longer hold back the tears welling in her eyes. Bit by bit, she began to choke, yet she still couldn't bring herself to accept that she was going to perish in such a ridiculous and sudden manner. The very next moment, she saw Lin Mu's vivid image appear before her, and she could scarcely believe that she had been thinking of this very person in the last fleeting moments of her life. The girl finally awoke already on the riverbank, thanks to the main character's timely action in pulling her out of the water. Our hero was overcome with happiness when his acquaintance finally regained consciousness, and all the surrounding onlookers collectively breathed a sigh of relief, as they too had been deeply worried about the victim. The girl, still disoriented, couldn't quite grasp what was happening around her, so she initially thought she had already died and that Lin Mu had joined her in the heavens. The young man calmly asked his acquaintance to stop uttering such nonsense and gently explained that he had successfully managed to save her. Suddenly, Luo Yun instinctively threw herself into the main character's arms, overwhelmed with emotion, because she had yearned for him for so long. Lin Mu was acutely aware that the girl desperately needed comfort and support after such a traumatic experience, so he tried to soothe her, explaining that everything was now perfectly fine. Clinging to the young man even tighter, she decided to ask how he had managed to locate her car at the bottom of the river. Our hero then recounted the story of how he observed the large crowd of people gathered around the submerged car, and in turn, he asked how his acquaintance had ended up in the water. The girl herself couldn't comprehend the reasons behind this incident, because her car had suddenly spiraled out of control, which sounded rather suspicious to her. Linmu then decided to escort Luoyun to change her wet clothes and kindly told her to take all the time she needed if she still hadn't fully recovered. People accompanied them with raucous applause and heartfelt compliments for the brave hero who had been able to rescue a defenseless girl from such a perilous situation. Events continue on the morning of the same day as students slowly began to gather at Dunhai University. Zhou Xian was trying to locate our hero and was exceptionally worried because his phone, which had been working not long ago, was now completely out of range. At this very moment, Lin Mu's neighbors appeared on the horizon, having already heard about the other girl who was searching for him. Dr. Zhou Xian confirmed it and correctly guessed that her savior's friends were standing right in front of her. Song Liangru inquired what the stranger was looking for the guy for, and immediately informed Zhou Xian that he hadn't returned home for several days, so even his closest friends didn't know his whereabouts. The girl confessed that Lin Mu had been staying at her house these past few days and had only left that very morning. Obviously, all the girlfriends were utterly shocked when they discovered that their neighbor had been staying at some hottie's house for all those days. Zhou Xian immediately clarified that a few days ago, the guy was seriously injured, so she had saved him and kept him with her for a few days to rest and fully recover his strength. Zixi became even more visibly frightened when she heard that Lin Mu had managed to get into some kind of serious trouble. The girl revealed that she had already heard that the main character had been attacked by an assassin named Qin Sha. Now, for the neighbors, everything suddenly fell into place, because the young man never disappeared without saying a single word of goodbye. Zhou Xian still couldn't remain calm about the fact that the young man still hadn't shown up, and she was genuinely afraid that something terrible had happened to him on his way to the university. Meanwhile, at Mr. Yan's house, they had already received fresh information from their spy. The aide informed Yin Junxing that Qin Shi, who was dispatched to assassinate Lin Mu, had failed his crucial task, and that young man had already returned home safely. Mr. Yin thought that it was all a complete outrage, because this particular assassin was an exceptionally strong cultivator. The servant politely asked Yin Junxing not to be so angry, rationalizing that it was only some youngster. The old man Yin Junxing retorted that it was easy to say such a thing, so he then sadly suggested that his subordinate go and actually eliminate this Lin Mu himself. The aide immediately panicked, emphasizing that he absolutely did not dare perform such a perilous task, so it would be far better to assign it to a professional assassin. In the end, the Lord Yin Junxing ordered that this time, only Pai should go, who definitely shouldn't relax, since it was now definitively known that their opponent was an unusual and formidable individual. Meanwhile, Lin Mu stepped over the threshold of the house, and the girls immediately froze in place when they saw their mysteriously missing neighbor. Lin Mu, of course, promptly apologized to the girls and explained that he had a few unexpected things going on these past few days. Zixi was very unhappy that our hero had returned home and hadn't even uttered a single word about it, expressing that they had all been very worried about him. The other girls also confirmed that they had been desperately searching for the guy the entire time, while he had quietly returned home. In the meantime, Song Liangru immediately stood up for her disciple and gently reminded her friend that his wounds had only just healed. Lin Mu was instantly very surprised because he couldn't comprehend how the girls knew about his injuries. At that moment, the neighbors clarified that they had already met Sister Zhou Xian, who had told them about the entire situation. Zixi became genuinely pissed off and couldn't contain her emotions anymore because she simply couldn't understand what kind of relationship the guy had with this particular girl. The protagonist quickly tried to clarify the situation and revealed that Dr. Zhou Xian was indeed his savior the last time he fell off the balcony. The girl Zixi was still visibly reluctant to believe that Lin Mu had lived with Zhou Xian for so many days and that absolutely nothing had happened between them. In the end, their conversation was abruptly cut short when the protagonist's phone vibrated in his pants pocket. The guy Lin Mu asked his girlfriend, referring to Zixi playfully, or to avoid further questioning, not to say such things about him, and apologized for having to take that incoming call. It turned out to be Dr. Zhou Xian who was finally able to reach Lin Mu, whose phone appeared to have gotten wet and had simply been repaired. The girls couldn't help but watch this, as they were intensely jealous of the guy for this mysterious stranger, so they started mockingly parodying their conversation. Suddenly, The protagonist heard that something strange and alarming was happening to his acquaintance Xiao Xian, because only her terrified screams could be heard through the phone. An unfamiliar voice then curtly informed him that the guy needed to immediately come to the third floor of Yingwenga Plaza if he didn't want something terrible to happen to Zhou Exine. The protagonist was instantly scared for Dr. Zhou Exine and frantically tried to find out who he was speaking to, but it was too late because the call abruptly ended. After such a strange and unsettling call, the guy stared silently at his phone and now couldn't figure out what he should do next. Song Liangru saw that he was very agitated and anxiously inquired about what had happened to Zhou Exine. Linmu immediately assumed that Dr. Zhou Exine had been kidnapped, so there was an urgent need to rush out and rescue her. The girls were in no hurry to let our hero go, because they were afraid that it was all a cunning setup trap, so first, it would be better to report the incident to the police. The young man firmly stopped his roommates, explaining that there was no way they could report this to anyone else, as then the kidnappers would not be ceremonial with Dr. Zhou Exine. After only half an hour, the protagonist arrived at the designated place where a guard was already waiting for him. Linmu looked around, verifying that Yingchuan Plaza was indeed the location. The guard at the entrance was in no hurry to let some young man through and first demanded to know if he had an appointment here. The young man was in a great hurry, which made him angry at this uncooperative bodyguard, and he informed him that he had come here specifically to meet their boss. The man guard still wouldn't let the cocky young man pass, asking who he even was, because not just anyone could simply barge in on their boss. Then our hero decided to demonstrate his immense strength and firmly grabbed the guard by the arm, explaining that the boss himself had asked him to come here. Eventually, the bodyguard had no choice but to take our hero to his boss, still not understanding where this strange guy even came from. He knocked gently on the boss's office door and announced that he had a visitor. Inside, our hero was met by the massive figure of a bald bandit, which immediately caught his eye, standing starkly against the background of a fragile, bound Dr. Zhou Exine. The girl's eyes were filled with profound fear, as she feared not only for her own life, but also for the safety of the young man himself. Linmu was now absolutely certain that his acquaintance had indeed been kidnapped, so the situation was extremely serious. The guy didn't care at all what the kidnappers' goals were, so he simply asked the bandits to release Zhou Exine first, after which they could then talk. The leader of the group rejoiced when he finally saw this famous, insufferable person, who turned out to be just an ordinary good-looking kid, so now he believed he would be able to get easy money. Meanwhile, bodyguards began to quickly surround the protagonist, intending to take him hostage as well. The young man stated with calm confidence in his voice that he didn't want to simply waste his time, so he asked all the opponents to attack him simultaneously. The fighters were visibly angered that Linmu appeared so brazen and arrogant, so they were determined to show him their collective strength. Before the head of the guard could even finish speaking, he heard muffled blows, which caused him to freeze on the spot because he had not expected such a rapid and decisive development of the event. It turned out that everyone who had dared to attack the protagonist was already lying helplessly around him, screaming in excruciating pain. The remaining guards were incredibly startled by this sudden turn of events and didn't even have time to fully comprehend what Linmu had just accomplished. The leader of the bandits was also momentarily confused but quickly ordered his subordinates to pile on their main target. The protagonist despised his weak opponents, who didn't even know how to properly behave in battle, so he disparagingly called them a herd of sheep. At the same time, Pai advised Linmu not to get so cocky, because it was obvious that he wouldn't be able to stand up against a whole bunch of experienced fighters. After only a few seconds, the bandits closed in on the protagonist and began to attack him from all sides, giving him absolutely no chance to escape. The guy decided to skillfully use the shadow technique he had managed to learn during his last fight, so he simply dissolved right in front of his opponent's charging fist. All the bodyguards immediately froze in place because they couldn't understand what had just occurred. The protagonist was already behind them and wondered who they were looking for so confusedly. Dr. Zhou, who had been closely observing the progression of this entire battle, was certain that for such a high-level cultivator, disposing of these little bipeds was far too easy. The girl's astute guesses turned out to be pure truth because the guards only had time to get punched squarely in the face by Linmu. Our hero was very disappointed that his opponents could not withstand even one single blow and immediately fell unconscious. After effortlessly dealing with all the bandits, he went up to the girl to free her from the ropes and apologized to her for being late. Pai realized that he had suffered a crushing defeat, and now he couldn't comprehend how some mere youngster had managed to wipe out all of his subordinates so effortlessly. Meanwhile, Linmu playfully scoffed at the fact that all the guards were too weak and suggested that their leader should definitely be stronger. The man Pai pointed a gun at our hero in a panic and started yelling that good kung fu skills are simply not enough to become invincible. The protagonist calmly agreed that he wasn't faster than a bullet, but he only needed to be faster than Pai to decisively win a duel with him. The bandit was utterly pissed off that Lin Mu was so stubborn, so he didn't want to wait any longer and furiously pulled the trigger of his gun. The guy quickly backed up his words with actions and lightning-fast pressure on his opponent's arm, causing him to shoot downward and inadvertently hit his own leg. Pai definitely didn't expect this shocking development, so he confusedly cried out in sharp, agonizing pain. The man resigned himself to the fact that he had lost this fight and bewilderedly asked what kind of person Lin Mu truly was. The protagonist recalled that the bandit himself had ordered him to come here, so it was ironic that he didn't recognize who his target was. Pai was terrified that the young man might do some terrible things to him, so he desperately asked him to let him go and promised to pay him back for sure. For his part, Lin Mu emphasized with a slight smirk on his face that he definitely didn't need anyone to pay him anything. The guy didn't want to wait, so he instantly made the man pay for everything he'd done. Our hero skillfully used his chi energy to completely erase Pai's memory and render him a fool. Dr. Joe, who had been watching from the side the entire time, wondered aloud what Lin Mu had just done to the bandit. The young man explained that he was merely using a subtle bit of yin to seal the man's yang. At this moment, some other people had already entered the hall, noting that everything here was quite lively. It appeared that it was another leader, accompanied by his subordinates, who agreed that Lin Mu was genuinely strong since he was able to overpower so many people. The protagonist tensed up when he saw some more strangers, so he immediately wondered who this new man was. The man did not hide his identity and introduced himself as Shinju Guang, a friend of the owner of the place, complaining that Lin Mu was interfering with his important work. The young man immediately recognized the name because he had heard that this person was Wang Xing's boss and also the esteemed head of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. One of Shinju Guang's subordinates stated that he would now take our hero to the bureau for questioning on the subject of inflicting willful injury. Our hero calmly replied that he had defeated all these people alone, so he asked them to let his acquaintance go, because his own detention would be sufficient punishment. Zhou Xian wanted to object to something, but the guy asked her not to worry and promised that he would be perfectly fine. The man Shinju Guang then firmly stated that he was the one in charge of the case, so the guy Lin Mu couldn't order him around, and he ordered his subordinates to grab everyone in the room. The protagonist didn't like the fact that no one wanted to let the girl go, but Dr. Zhou Xian herself tried to calm him down. In the end, they both had to obey Shinju Guang's instructions and walk along with his men. Lin Mu started to feel a pang of guilt for involving Zhou Xian in all this, but the latter Qiao Xian asked him not to worry because she herself had yet to properly thank him for saving her life. In the corridor of the hotel, they met up with Xing Weiyang, who couldn't understand what kind of commotion was going on here. The fatty immediately recognized Brother Lin's familiar face and wondered what he was doing here. The guy Xing Weiyang couldn't figure out who all these people surrounding his friend were, so he anxiously asked where they were taking Lin Mu, because it all looked far too suspicious. Someone from the group explained that the police were conducting official business and the protagonist had fallen under suspicion, and the fat man himself was advised to mind his own business. Lin Mu was glad that his buddy had shown up so timely and discreetly handed him a small note. The protagonist asked Xing Weiyang to call the number on that piece of paper a little later and inform that person of his arrest. Very soon, Lin Mu and Zhou Xian had already arrived at the Public Security Bureau of Dunhai City. The policeman who conducted the interrogation informed the girl that her buddy had already confessed to everything, so she could now be free. The girl explained that it was true that this was the other side of the whole situation and tried to justify Lin Mu's actions. The man policeman asked her to stop and promised that they would definitely look into the matter thoroughly. Zhou Xin was very excited and anxiously asked where the detained guy was now and what would happen to him next. At the same time, our hero was placed in a detention center where he had already managed to get into a conflict. Turns out, the guy had already decided to teach his cellmate, who also couldn't resist his power, a swift lesson. The second prisoner could not maintain his balance from such a powerful blow and fell heavily to the cold floor of the cell. The protagonist emphatically stated that he wanted some rest and politely asked his neighbor not to disturb him. The battered fellow was visibly dissatisfied with the fact that his partners had become so submissive and didn't attack Lin Mu. Eventually, the other prisoners mustered up enough courage to try and teach the arrogant newcomer a lesson. Lin Mu decided to playfully toy with his new opponents, so he permitted them to strike him once. The guy, one of the prisoners, threw himself forward to make it easier on his opponent and warned him that he might regret it. It turns out that our hero had a cunning plan, so he concentrated all the energy in his head, causing it to become literally as hard as iron. This was immediately followed by an unpleasant crunching sound from the fingers of the overly brave lad, who now instantly realized his grave mistake. After only a second, he screamed loudly from the incredible pain and clutched his broken arm. Everyone around him began to realize that this guy was not an easy opponent, because he was obviously a very skilled fighter. It was then that the strongest prisoner decided to enter the fray and teach the overconfident newcomer a harsh lesson. Lin Mu was carefully observing the situation around him, so he instantly noticed that someone was about to launch an attack. The man shouted belligerently and swung around to deal with the protagonist quickly. The young man realized that his opponent was about to execute a surprise lunge to the chest and a kick to the stomach, which demonstrated his good martial arts skills. In the end, the protagonist simply tossed his opponent aside effortlessly and noted that he was still far too weak to properly measure his strength. The man gave up and reluctantly agreed that Lin Mu was indeed an exceptionally strong fighter. The other inmates were shocked by this development because Brother Wan, who was known as the best fighter, had been defeated by some mere boy. Meanwhile, Shen Zhuguang, who was sitting quietly in his office, was already being sternly told off for arbitrarily grabbing Lin Mu. The man was confused because he was sure he was acting according to all the rules and regulations, as this guy had indeed hurt people. The boss, presumably a higher authority, couldn't comprehend the official's lack of understanding and informed his subordinate that the man Lin Mu was someone they absolutely could not touch. The policeman started to worry that the Yin family might get angry if they let this guy go, and the chief boss realized that it was all this family's mischievous shenanigans. In the end, the boss firmly informed him that if anything even happened to Lin Mu, not even 10 Yin families combined would save his subordinate's head. The police chief didn't even know how to respond to these dire threats because he immediately realized that the matter was extremely serious. He finally found the courage to reach out to Mr. Li, but all he heard in response was a humming tone. The man realized that Central Bureau Chief Li himself had called him to demand that this person be released, and now he was afraid to even imagine what kind of immense power Lin Mu finally possessed. He quickly jumped up from his seat and ordered Xiaolu to quickly go to the detention center. The subordinate tried to find out what was so serious, but the boss wouldn't explain the whole sensitive situation and simply stated that this time the Yin family had seriously messed them over. At the same time, the assistant informed Mr. Yin that he had already completed his assignment. He reported that the Central Bureau Chief had called Shen Zhuguang, after which Liao Zheng immediately released the protagonist from detention. The old man Mr. Yin didn't expect at all that Liao Zheng might be familiar with his target, which completely ruined all his elaborate plans. The assistant explained that they were strangers to each other because they had only had one brief phone conversation before Shen Zhuguang was ordered to release him. The master Mr. Yin had not expected at all that someone was capable of giving direct orders to Liao Zheng, and now he desperately wanted to know who was trying to protect Lin Mu. The aide was unable to obtain any specific data because their conversation was encrypted, and if they tried to decrypt that sensitive information, they might be detected themselves. The man Mr. Yin didn't care about that at all because they couldn't back down anymore and simply had to finally deal with the protagonist. He immediately ordered to contact the Black Spikes and place an order to kill the guy, because they surely couldn't let him get away this time. The events moved to the Dunhai Public Security Bureau where Lin Mu had already emerged, and the police officers tried to explain that it was all just a big misunderstanding. Shin Zhuguang was more than a little frightened, so he now implored the guy not to take it all to heart. The protagonist once again calmly asked if he could leave, and the policeman, bowing his head respectfully, confirmed it. At that moment, the young man heard that someone was already waiting for him outside the detention center and rejoiced at his release. It turned out to be Xing Weiyang, who had already heard that his buddy was doing well, so he had come to pick him up. The guy Xing Weiyang offered to celebrate our hero's release and enthusiastically wanted to do it at the Hilton, which made Lin Mu begin to suspect that the fat man was up to something, since he was acting so unusually generous. Xing Weiyang admitted that it was only his immense pleasure to do something nice for Brother Lin. 30 minutes later, they had already arrived at the Hilton Hotel, the very place the fat man wanted to go. They were greeted by several staff members at once, who politely escorted the guests to their reserved table. As they settled into their seats, Xing Weiyang asked the protagonist to peruse the menu and choose a set that he particularly liked. The young man explained that he wasn't very adept at picking out food, so he wisely entrusted this task to his buddy. The fat man chuckled warmly and playfully warned our hero that he had only himself to blame if he didn't like something. When he opened the menu, his appetite was whetted even more, so his order consisted of foie gras with caviar, crab and curry sauce, and steamed lobster. Meanwhile, Lin Mu asked where the restroom was located here, and the waitress readily agreed to escort him there. Our hero thanked the hotel employee for such a high level of service and followed her. The girl stopped in the hallway and explained that the restroom was just up ahead on the left side. At the same time, there was a separate meeting with Yu Shinxian taking place in another room at the hotel to discuss the lead role for a new movie with her. The girl had already read the script and liked it quite a bit, and she had no questions about the contract, so she wanted to know who would be the chosen lead actor in this movie. The director stated they haven't yet chosen the person who will be her partner, so he asked if she had any recommendations based on the contents of the script. Yao Xinxian mused that it would be better if they cast a newcomer in the lead role, and she just happened to have such a person in mind, but she wasn't entirely sure if he would even be interested. Another team member expressed keen interest in this solution and eagerly asked who this mysterious person was. The girl revealed that she had met the guy at her concert and had tried to invite him on stage to sing together, but he had politely declined, which had been pretty awkward at the time. Now, a moment later, our heroes left the hall after thoroughly enjoying the fine food, and Xing Weiyang suggested going there again in the future. On their way, they unexpectedly met up with Yao Xinxian, who was shocked that she had encountered Lin Mu here. The guy also stopped abruptly because he certainly didn't expect to meet the singer whom he had refused at her own concert. Xing Weiyang immediately recognized this famous superstar and was genuinely surprised that she knew his brother and knew him so closely. The girl immediately approached the principal and informed him that this was the very guy she was just talking about, and she eagerly asked for his view on the idea. The man agreed that she had pretty good taste because this young man looked genuinely good and was poised perfectly for the main character in the movie. The director also joined this conversation and kindly asked Lin Mu to discuss it all over, promising that it wouldn't take long. Xing Weiyang happily answered for his friend and stated that they had a lot of free time today, so they could leisurely discuss all the intricate details. The main character still hadn't uttered a single word, and the fat man Xing Weiyang had already talked about being big shots in the entertainment industry, implying this conversation could be quite useful. In the end, Lin Mu agreed with his buddy, although he wasn't particularly burning with desire to go to this meeting. After that, they asked the hotel for a bigger room and proceeded to talk about the movie. Yao Xinxian introduced the famous investors Wasa and Mr. Wang, who would generously sponsor the filming, to the guys. They exchanged pleasantries and shook hands as a sign of their budding familiarity. The girl also introduced screenwriter Huang Shu, producer Wang Jiang, and director Fang Yuan. When everyone was seated at the table, she immediately offered to cut straight to the chase because they had one serious proposal for the main character. Yao Xinxian revealed that Mr. Wang was preparing to shoot a new movie, and she had highly recommended Lin Mu as an actor for the crucial lead role in it. Xing Weiyang couldn't believe his ears when he heard that his friend was being offered to star in a movie, especially as a lead actor. The director confirmed that in terms of our hero's looks and inherent character, he was absolutely perfect for the role, as if it was custom-tailored for him. The guy Lin Mu was still in no hurry to agree to this offer, because he didn't know at all what he should do next. The man Mr. Wong explained that life is like a dramatic show, so it all depends on how the actor acts in life, because his acting was just a variation of life itself. Lin Mu felt that it was all too wrong, because he might not be able to effectively do his job, and the movie would end up being a complete waste of precious time and effort. Yao Xinxian earnestly asked the guy to believe her, because she firmly believed that no one else could handle the role as well, and she promised that everyone on the team would actively help him. Xing Weiyong also desperately wanted his friend to try out for the movie because that way he could potentially reveal his hidden acting talent. The girl Yao Xinxian confirmed the guy's words, explaining that a lot of famous stars didn't even finish acting school and simply stumbled into the entertainment industry, which ultimately made them world famous. In the end, our protagonist decided to put his trust in his friends, but he still humorously warned them that they shouldn't dare to blame him if anything went wrong later. The director was utterly delighted that Lin Mu had finally agreed to be filmed and enthusiastically promised that there would absolutely be no problems with their upcoming movie. Meanwhile, the director asked Lin Mu if he was free the very next day because he was eager to sign a contract with him right away. Lin Mu wasn't opposed to the idea at all, so he inquired about a convenient time for them to meet. The director promptly handed him his business card and asked him to arrive at the given address around 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Lin Mu expressed his gratitude to the movie team for believing in his potential and promised that tomorrow he would be precisely in the right place at the right time.